I didn't start off empowerment plan thinking I was going to like impact even as many. Like I was just like, okay, we've got like a few people here in Detroit want to make coats for. And I think there's power in that. Like working on it, being like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, getting my feet under me. And you don't have to like start off to change the world. You can just be like, I want to change my community.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate Bryan. The One Girl Revolution podcast highlights the stories of everyday women who are changing the world through their lives. Every week, I talk to inspiring women and girls who are doing something incredible to make a difference in the world. Please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share this podcast with your friends and family. We couldn't be doing this without you. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl, REVO. We're on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, the number one girl revolution. And you can find all of our social media links, podcast episodes, videos, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com. On today's episode, you're going to be reminded that you don't have to have a lot of money or even a big plan to make a difference. Sometimes there are just these little flickers, these little glimmers that show up in our lives that lead us to where we're supposed to be and to what we're supposed to be doing. Look for those glimmers in your life and don't be afraid to chase them. They may lead to something bigger and more amazing than you ever could have imagined. On today's episode, I am so excited and so honored to welcome Veronika Scott, the founder of the Empowerment Plan, to the One Girl Revolution podcast. I have known about Veronika and her story for many years, and I'm just so thrilled to get to talk to her and to share her story on this podcast. You may be familiar with Veronika's story, but I'm sure you've never heard some of the things that she shares in this podcast episode or heard her story told in this way. Veronika grew up with parents who struggled with addiction, and because of that, she experienced homelessness throughout her early years. When she got into college, like so many of us, she wanted to leave her old life behind and become someone new. She went to the College for Creative Studies, and it wasn't until she took a particular class that changed everything, and her life truly came full circle. Amidst the financial crisis just after 2008, Detroit was often seen as dead, never to come back from the depths. Time magazine published a cover story that pretty much said that, and I'm paraphrasing, but it said, "Detroit is dead." It was around that time that Veronika's professor challenged her and her fellow classmates to create something that would serve a need in the community as their final project. Veronika returned to her roots and visited a couple of shelters in the Detroit area and spent time with those experiencing homelessness and ended up creating a winter jacket that could be turned into a sleeping bag. But not only that, she created an organization called the Empowerment Plan that is making and delivering these winter jacket sleeping bags to those experiencing homelessness around the world. But she also created an incredible employment program that is helping those experiencing homelessness find employment and transition out of homelessness into the lives that they were created to live. I am so blown away by the Empowerment Plan and all that they do, as well as Veronika's powerful story and what she and the Empowerment Plan community has created. You do not want to miss this episode. It is so inspiring. This episode with Veronika is so powerful, and it will encourage you to open your eyes and see the people around you in your own community, and to look for ways to help those in need around you, but also around the world. And you're going to want to support and get involved in the incredible work of the Empowerment Plan. I loved spending time with Veronika, and I know that you will too. Enjoy this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, and please share it. Without further ado, here's Veronika. Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. We've had many of your friends on the podcast, and I'm so excited to have you on to talk about the Empowerment Plan and everything, all the great work that you're doing. But before we get into your story, I'm always curious who a One Girl Revolution, who a woman or girl that's inspired you in your life, or maybe is inspiring you right now.
So I luckily get to work with women every day. Like that's part of my job is I work with primarily women, and I have a lot of women in my in my board of directors. So I feel like I have surrounding me a lot of incredible females. So it's really tough to like pick one person. I feel like I'm picking one person over another, but historically there was somebody that comes to mind immediately was somebody that's no longer with us, but was one of the first people I ever hired at Empowerment Plan. She felt like co-founder, like built it with me. And she was a woman by the name of Annis that we actually that I hired from a local shelter, and really just owned it with me, like owned the mission, the vision, and just became like a den mother to everybody that came through the organization. And, a lot of people talk about like, oh, how did it go from a class project to this organization? And it's people like Annis, but specifically her, like she built a culture of like, this is the family. We're here to care for each other. I know what you've been through. Let me help you. And that wasn't me at all. That was just her doing. So I think that and what she kind of set in motion is what like I aspire to do all the time. If I even possibly remotely can come close to that. But there's so many people I can think of that I'm just very lucky to have a lot of like powerhouse women in my life.
Yeah. And being in Detroit, there are so many incredible powerhouse women too. So, but yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And like, just that her legacy continues on through Empowerment Plan and through the work that you're doing.
We used to have a giant, I wouldn't say mural, but like a big, I kind of made an image of her after she passed, and we had it in Pony Ride where we got started in Detroit. I had it on like one wall. So it was great. She used to be on the back of our business cards and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's so cool. Well, I can't wait to talk about all the other stories from the Empowerment Plan. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear your story. And I know a little bit because I've, seen different interviews with you throughout the years, but I'd love to rewind and talk about your early life and who you are and where you're from and just a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. So where to start? Like the beginning, I guess, or like where to start? Both of my, like for me personally, both of my parents have struggled with homelessness, poverty, addiction, and mental health. So this is something that I'm deeply tied to and is like very personal for me. I think that's where in the beginning, when I started Empowerment Plan, I was offended by the way people talked about those in poverty and those that were like struggling. I took it personally. And I think in the beginning, I was really trying very hard to like cover that up. In the beginning, I was, going through high school and into college and just trying to hide that experience that I felt like if people saw it, they would pity me or feel bad or change their behavior towards me. And I didn't want anybody to look at that and all they could see is, oh, her parents don't have jobs, or, oh, so-and-so struggles with mental health. Cause I felt like from my experience growing up, once people knew that, even family members, they would kind of treat us, me and my siblings, just as extensions of our parents, as if because we didn't, because they didn't, go to college and because they needed support from government subsidies, they were on food stamps or WIC or anything like that, that automatically me and my siblings would be the same way because they were unemployed or because they were struggling, that we were just by default going to have the same life. And it's a really hard hole to climb out of how people perceive you and perceive what you're worth. And so I think for me, when, going through college, I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to go off and have a life that was different than what I grew up with. I wanted to go to CCS. I got into industrial design because I thought, I'll be able to have a career. I'll be able to make money. I'll have a different life. And it's very interesting. The thing that I had settled on had nothing to do with really any of that, but that idea of nobody can know, kind of covering it up. I don't want anyone to know that about me. And so I think over the years, obviously, that's something that I definitely own and I'm very proud of. And I think makes me uniquely equipped to be doing what I'm doing now. And also, I think in the beginning, early days of Empowerment Plan, why I think that, first 3 people that I hired from that shelter and I were so close was that we all had that kind of similar shared experience that we were working with. And so that's my personal side of it, and like why it's gone on beyond just this like class project in college, because I know everybody knows that side. It was a class project and it became something more, but it's really very personal for me.
I love what you shared too, just sharing about your own story, because so many of us experience that. We don't want to be put in the box that the world puts us in, or our friends or family. And I think you go off to college and so many people experience that. And they're like, I'm going to do the complete opposite. I'm going to get
Become
into,
someone new.
Right. Become someone new and, be this individual person. But then what ends up happening, I think, in a lot of our lives is things that we experienced as children or in our upbringing, it kind of comes full circle. So things that we're doing, and I think about that even with this podcast, there were times when I didn't feel like I had a voice or that I was seen. And so then to create a podcast like this, where women, their voices are heard and they are seen. So I just love so much about you sharing your story, that it has come full circle in so many ways. And you have but simultaneously you've paved your own path.
And I think that's interesting. So I've done like a lot of public speaking to college students, I think is really interesting. And it resonates with college students. And I get a lot of like younger kids coming up and like talking to me about like, I struggle with this, or I'm on scholarship here. I wouldn't have been able to go if I hadn't had like financial aid and all of these things, and like lack of like place, and feeling like, especially when it comes to starting something, starting a business, starting a nonprofit, starting anything really, feeling like it's not for you. It's for somebody else. It's for somebody else that has money, connections, network, power, whatever that may be. Like I was my own kind of worst critic, and almost the reason why Empowerment Plan didn't start wasn't because of anything else, but like mostly me thinking, I'm not the right person to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no experience. I have no money. How is this going to work? Like, I think we can be, especially as women, our own kind of biggest detractors. Like, there's so many studies done on how this is not like, men will say that they're an entrepreneur, but women have a hard time with that word and hard time using that word, or saying that they're a business owner. They're like, oh no, I just do hair or cooking, or it's just a thing on the side, but really this is an incredible business. And so I think we all struggle with that, like really struggled owning this as an organization for a long time because of it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how the organization started, because it started when you were in college.
Yeah.
And you took a class that changed your life.
Yeah, it's really wild to think about. So went to CCS, College for Creative Studies here in Detroit, and I was studying industrial design, which is not quite engineering, not quite design. Like it's kind of the middle ground. And for me, I saw it because I knew nothing about it when going from high school. I picked it because I thought this is a great way. I was always good at art. Art was something I could do with no money. All you needed was like pen, paper. You didn't need fancy supplies to be good at being creative. And so I always latched onto that. And when I got into art school, I was like, I don't want to be a starving artist. I want to do something different. And it was really interesting to see that like potential career, especially with automotive industry. Everyone designed cars, and it was predominantly like consumer goods, electronics, toasters, like kitchen gadgets, all about how to make them like fast and sexy and all of these things. And so the class that really changed it was, I went to college at a very unique time. I started in 2007. The economy started to collapse in 2008, 2009. And then all these automotive companies also started to go through their own financial, catastrophic financial issues. And that pathway that many of us thought that we had getting into college of like, oh, we're going to do well and we're going to go into these automotive companies or these like traditional design firms, kind of dried up overnight. Detroit was a very different place during that time. And one of my teachers, and I think in an effort to help people understand that this is not, design isn't only this thing. His name was Steve Schock. He said, look, there's an incredible group traveling around the US in an Airstream, and they're, addressing challenges that communities are facing with design. And how do you solve for a need, a real need, not like I need a slightly better dishwasher, but like, we don't have a school. What do we do? Like, how do we do this? Or we struggle with clean water, like those real needs. How do you address that? And it was interesting because all the students in the beginning immediately started to think outside of the city. They're like, oh, India, like all these places, some places they've never been, but this idea of like, oh, these big needs, and I remember his thing was like, no, we're in Detroit. Detroit was about to go through its own bankruptcy. Like Detroit had its own laundry list of things. And he's like, no, I want you to figure out how to solve for a need here, home, like around the corner. And that was really what started it all.
I love that you shared that too, because we often think, or I think that even the media focuses on these international stories. And even when I asked you at the beginning, like, who's a One Girl Revolution in your own life? A lot of times we see people that are doing amazing things all over the world. And we're like, oh, that's cool. Instead of just focusing on what's right in front of us, like what's right around us. And so I love that they encourage you to look at Detroit. And so
you kind of forced us. I don't think we would have otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you started looking at Detroit and you saw a need, and how did the idea for the empowerment plan start from there?
So initially it was just a code. First it was nothing, like no idea whatsoever. And the class project was, basically we needed to go into the community and interview people. We needed to get outside of the college campus, which most of the students hadn't ever been outside of the college campus, and start talking to other Detroit residents. And it was interesting because this is something I still hear to this day, but a lot of the people we talked to, and specifically we went to Cass Tech and talked to a lot of students there. And they talked about how every day they would see the same person on their way to school, or their parents would see the same person on the way to work. And at that time, the old Cass Tech hadn't been torn down yet. So the new Cass Tech building was looking into the abandoned and empty old Cass Tech, and people were living inside of that building. Homeless individuals that were displaced, people that had nowhere else to go, were just like they were in a classroom looking out into an old classroom and watching people kind of walk around and live in this old school. And I think that hit them really hard as teenagers. And one, it's like for them safety, but also too, just like, well, what can I do? It's so weird. You're seeing it every day. Unlike a lot of cities, Detroit is very unique. It had, at the time, it was around 72,000 abandoned buildings and about 20,000 people that were counted homeless. But because of the sheer volume of abandoned buildings, a lot of people weren't seen. Like I said, it was people in these homes or in these old buildings. So you had an estimated 40,000 people that were displaced on any given night, and only a couple shelters, like 3, I think they could house 1,800 people on any given evening. So you have thousands of people with nowhere to go. And so a lot of people just talked about that kind of one person that they saw, and they felt that struggle that everyone feels when they see somebody that's in need. Like, what do I do? Do I give money? Can I give food? Can I get somebody a hotel room? Like, there's just that list that goes through our heads of how we give back. And so that's for me, what started the research along. Okay, I want to figure out what we can do for, Detroit's displaced population and what's at the root cause and what's going on. And so I went to a warming center, NSO, their Toonami Center on MLK and 3rd. And that was blocks from where I lived at the time. So it was easy to get to. And I went the first time. I was supposed to go with other classmates and no one came with me. So I was there by myself with all sorts of design research crap, and got pushed out in front of a crowd of about 50 people, all sitting kind of in a chair watching television. And they could sit there for about 8 hours before being rotated out for the next group. And everything they owned had to either fit on their lap or underneath their chair, otherwise it was thrown out. And so you could sit for hours, and then hundreds and hundreds of people will be waiting outside for that next group to be let in. And so that's where I started the project. And one night, the night manager said, all right, you want to talk to some people, be my guest. Pushes me out in front of the crowd of people, clicks off the television and says, good luck, you're going to need it, and then walks away. Everyone just stands up and starts swearing at me. And it takes him about like 5-10 minutes to get everyone to calm down. And I remember holding all my like stuff up to my chest as if it was like going to protect me from bodily harm. And all I could say was like, look, I'm broke. I live with my grandparents and I need your help passing this class, which was super inspiring. Very, very, very inspiring moment with everyone there. And then I said it's 2 different groups. And one of the women said to me, she's like, if you want to help me turn my fucking television back on. And I was like, okay, understood. But that is how this whole project got started, was that beautiful, friendly evening. I started showing up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night at 8 p.m. when the shift would change over to the night manager. And I would go there. I went there for about 5 months, same time, 3 times a week, even just to see everybody, to talk with them, even if I wasn't going to be there for long. And seeing how many people were waiting outside, 2 people actually kitty corner to this building were living inside of a playground that was covered in tarps and clothes that had been burned. I saw them one week and the next week it was burned down on a turf war. The 2 people ended up surviving that incident, only to pass away about 6 months later, just from being out in the elements for so long. And so for me, my goal with Empowerment Plan was around this question of, why would you create something for yourself when somebody is trying to give it to you for free 20 feet away? Mm-hmm. But they made a shelter out of a playground and ended up paying the ultimate price to do so. And what we don't think about when we talk about charity or nonprofit work or giving back or any of this, we don't talk about like the pride and dignity and all of these things that go hand in hand with, yes, there's a very serious need for shelter, but at the same time, how do we do so in a way that uplifts people and treats them with respect rather than treats them like they've done something wrong? So, there's the coat aspect of the work, but I think for me, the emotional aspect got started that, in those early days.
Yeah. And just those encounters too. Like, I'm sure you could write.
I've got lists.
Yeah. I'm sure you could write books just about even those early days encounters and conversations that you had with people. But one thing that I am always really interested in is these forgotten about populations, which all of us can fit into at different points in our lives. I've done a lot of work with the incarcerated population and, those experiencing homelessness and Native Americans. I know there's a lot of stuff going on right now on reservations. So there's so many different forgotten about populations. And when you don't see them, you don't think about them. But I think even your experiences with the students and recognizing, even if they just see one person, that's a moment to open your eyes and say, there are so many others that you just don't see.
Exactly. That's what Detroit has always kind of struggled with. It has a lot of unseen, people that disappear into the landscape that we don't, like you said, see very often. And that's what makes it so hard, is people, because Detroit is so large, because it's such a big place. It's hard to wrap your arms around big issues, because in other cities, they could be a little bit more manageable, but this is just kind of massive. Yeah. And also there's, it was just it was a wild time in Detroit at that moment. Like nonprofits were dying off because of the funding drying up. It wasn't the best time to like start a nonprofit organization. But, you know, I think I am just incredibly grateful to the shelters that like opened up their doors to me just to like come in and talk to people. They did not have to do that at all. Like we still work very closely with NSO. They've been a partner for years. And it's just incredible, like the work that they had to do and figure out how to do when it was a wild time.
Yeah. Well, for people that are listening that haven't been to Detroit in the winter or to Michigan in the winter, it's bitter, bitter, bitter cold.
Yeah. So I don't know how to explain that to somebody. How cold is it?
Yeah. How cold is it in Michigan? And so I always think about when I see the winter jackets that you turn into sleeping bags, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to just I feel like I need one for myself, just going out into the elements from time to time. But that's what you ended up coming up with. So through these conversations with people, and I know there's a whole nother element too, where you're creating jobs.
There's a million
there's
different
so many.
stories.
Yeah. But at the base of it, you ended up coming up with this idea to create winter jackets that turn into sleeping bags. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear just a little bit about that.
Well, it was at that warming center where I was with NSO that I first got the idea for it, kind of based on the fact that there, like I said, hundreds of people that couldn't get in and people making homes out of whatever they could to survive. And also doing it for the fact that they wanted to be in charge of their own life. They wanted to, you know, if you're in a shelter or in any of these situations, you have to recognize how hard it is. It's not, I think people think of it for some reason as easy, and it's not. It's an incredibly difficult process. And it as a person to be told where you can sit, when you can sleep, what you can eat, like every point of your day is dictated by somebody else. It's very hard to live within. And so people want to have their autonomy and take that back. And so with that, when you don't think about how, okay, what are the things that people can do to feel like they're in control and that they're doing something, that they're creating a better life for themselves. And you can see that in a lot of different ways. And so that is what inspired the coat, actually, was just that one playground. And initially I wanted to be a coat tent, and the tent part never panned out, like collapsed pretty quickly. It took 80 hours to make the first prototype. I had to learn how to sew for my mother. We did it together in my grandparents' basement. It was the worst experience of her life and mine. It was very rough as far as the construction process. And we did this on a home sewing machine and seam ripped old wool coats and Frankenstein sewed them back together. And then old billboard fabric and orange construction fencing because the tent, and I wanted it to be all recycled. It was about over 20 pounds, which is very heavy for a coat, and had broken needles. It was just a disaster. But I was very proud of it because I'd spent 2 weeks of my life on it, brought it back to the shelter. And I remember one woman coming up to me, she's like, that's nice and all cute, good job. But there's no way I'm going to get in that. It looks like a body bag. I was like, point taken. Okay. And so I was able to, that's the kind of beauty of college time and having that time to be so lucky and so privileged. I was like, oh, okay, that didn't work. So I'm going to do another one. Had the time to keep going back and coming up with version after version and going back to the shelter. So much so, as this class project wraps up, I end up with a street name that I still have to this day in that area, which is the Coat Lady or the Crazy Coat Girl. It was wonderful. I had a spokesperson. He was incredible. His name was Pee Wee. He would walk around with me and talk to people and get their thoughts on the product. And he had a clipboard with his name at the top, but other people could sign up. It was an incredible, for somebody that designs behind a computer, to get out, actually talk to people, to see that they were asking me for for a coat. When is it going to happen? When am I going to get one? For somebody that just kind of came up with prototypes and digital designs, it was an incredible, incredible feeling to feel like you're making something that has an immediate and direct impact.
You ended up figuring out how to actually like make the coat, but then there's a whole job element, because I know that you had an experience where a woman was like, we don't need coats, we need jobs.
At the same warming center. Yeah. So months and months later, class project is over. I'm still coming back, kind of in springtime, summer now. And a woman that I had seen many times as I was leaving the shelter started yelling at me, full on screaming, saying, look, what you're doing doesn't matter. I need a coat. I don't need a coat. I need a job. And I remember at the time being like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And I was like talking with her and she's like, this is nice and all, whatever, that's cute, but like, I need a job. And I was like, okay, like, how do you do that? Like, that was my brain. Like, how do you make jobs? Like, that was just something that was so surreal to me. I was like, how does that happen? And I remember, okay, I was like, all right, because I had never done anything like this, and because school had not equipped me to the next idea of employing people, my parents were, okay, well, I guess I need, money. And in order to get money to hire somebody, I need a business plan. And I Googled business plans and talked to people, my grandparents' friends, about what those looked like. And I built like basically a paint by numbers version of a business plan. It was 15 pages of pictures, like two sentences total, I think, in the whole document. And like a very tiny little spreadsheet in the back that said we needed $1,600 to operate for a year. It didn't include, like I said, wanting to hire people. It only included like one sewing machine and some materials. No thread, no needles, no people, no space, no nothing, just that. It was a fascinating business plan. But that got me showing that to people. It was like the stepping off point. Like, I didn't have to have all my shit together. I could have just like this booklet to start. And that's how I got connected early on with Carhartt. They became first donor of like materials and sewing machines. Then I needed a place to put all those things. So I partnered with another shelter. They gave me an old utility closet to use. And because I was inside of that shelter, I was like, well, I'm here. I could just start hiring people from this location. And that's how the first people got hired. And as far as the finances went, the story at that point, which was so wild, I think Detroit was hurting for like just good stories, because at this point, the Time magazine had come out with this Detroit cover of like, Detroit's dead. The city is dead. It's over. And every news, like major news, was saying the same thing. CNN, New York Times, like there's nothing left. And so I think a lot of local Detroit was trying to push back. Local Detroit media was saying, no, we're not dead. There's still a lot of great people and great things happening. So the story of me making a coat and hiring a couple people inside a utility closet got picked up. And because of a misquote in the first line saying it was a $2,000 coat for the homeless, the story went viral. And that was the greatest thing ever, which was it gave me opportunities to correct the fact that I'm not making couture coats for individuals that were displaced. And that got us on many different stages and able to talk about it and then raise money without actually having to raise, just funded by the PayPal button of my blog for the first year.
That's incredible. And I love that your story for so many different reasons, but even for everybody who's listening, if you have an idea, or even students that are out there that are doing, a final project, think of some sort of community element, and you just never know. I'm sure when you were sitting in that utility closet, you could never have fathomed all the things that the empowerment plan has gone on to do.
Not at all. And I didn't have like the crazy vision strategy documents at that time. It was just like, okay, let's get through now.
Yeah.
And we didn't really start as an organization until I think it was like January of 2012, basically the week after I graduated college. I was like, well, I guess I'm doing this full time. I don't even know what that means, but this is my new full-time job.
And here you are years later, and it's still
It's
full time.
it's wild to think that next year will be 10 years. I think.
Crazy. I hope you
Yeah.
guys are gonna have a big celebration.
Yeah, I think so. Depending on how the world's doing, it
Yeah.
makes it so weird to think about.
So for people that are listening, what is the empowerment plan? I know there are so many different facets to it. Obviously, you're making the winter jackets that turn into sleeping bags. You're hiring people that are experiencing homelessness or going through other difficulties, but I'd love to hear from you. What is the empowerment plan?
So the Empowerment Plan is a nonprofit based in Detroit that focuses on ending the generational cycle of homelessness through employment. And we do that by hiring individuals from shelters across the city and employing them to produce coats that turn into sleeping bags that we then give out globally to those in need. We've done over 50,000 coats since we began and distribute them across all 50 states and now 21 other countries.
Wow.
And so we've been able to impact a lot of people, which is so funny. Think about from like that class project to like impacting lives this way. And we've hired over 100 individuals from shelters, 100 families. And we really focus on hiring families. So when we hire somebody, we try to get people that have dependents that a lot of workforce development programs missed before because this person couldn't go to a 6-week training for free because they have kids, and what are their kids going to do? Where are they going to go? And they need the income. So I'm kind of bringing those individuals that have been looked over in that kind of workforce development jobs training piece. And over the years, it's been incredible to see, everyone moving out of the shelter within the first 4 to 6 weeks of working with us and moving now. Really, we act as like a stepping stone into something greater. So people work with us for about 2 years on average and go on into incredible careers. Like we have a lot of people now in the healthcare field. There's been growing need in the last year, working as CNAs, some in industrial sewing, some in other manufacturing, some in welding. Like it's incredible to see where people go.
How do you get connected to, I know that you're obviously connected to numerous shelters here, but how do you get connected to the people that you hire? And then how do you find the people that you're sending coats to?
So sending coats has been word of mouth since day one, which is wild to think about. And right now, so we got like 12,000 coat orders just last year alone. Last year's also unprecedented amount of demand, like unlike anything we've ever seen. And so it really shows you what COVID has done to our most vulnerable and how even the individuals that weren't in that place tipped, and how easy it is for any one of us. I think this past year, 2020, really showed us that no one is far away from homelessness as we'd like to think we are at any given moment. But one of the wildest things is that need. We have like a 2-month wait list right now for coats, something that we've never, the demand has outpaced us in a crazy way. We've never experienced that before. And so right now we're really focused on hiring, which means, our practice is going into a shelter. We have great partners all over the city, organizations like Alternatives for Girls, Detroit Rescue Mission Ministries, Coalition on Temporary Shelters. So there's a multitude of organizations. We go in, our HR director and our programs director go into a shelter and say, okay, here's the job, answer questions, start collecting resumes and interview people from there. It's not just like an opportunity for whoever wants it. We do really want to see things that really aren't on paper, but it's all about that motivation. What gets you up every day? What kind of life do you want to have? What things do you want to accomplish? What are your goals? And a lot of people, if they have those things that they know that they just want to achieve, they just need help, that's the absolute right person for us, because we're going to give you as many opportunities as we can. It's all up to you. Like it's all them at the end of the day that makes it happen. So I think it's just about that matchmaking process of finding those people that want to create a better life, maybe even not even just for themselves, but for their whole family.
Yeah. And some people just need an opportunity, right? Like I was talking to our friend Amy Peterson about that, just with what she's doing with tea. And sometimes people just need an opportunity just to get their feet below them again. And I think we saw that so often over the past year with people losing their jobs. But if they got an opportunity, they would run with it and they would work really hard. And I know that the people that you're working with, they're doing that. And it's really up to them where they go from their job with the empowerment plan.
Yeah, I think giving people the opportunity is definitely part of it. I think understanding that it's a holistic thing though. You know, it's you have to look at the whole person. You can't just look at it from one side of, oh, let me just give this person a job and they'll figure it out. You know, it's the mental health piece. It's physical health. We see a lot of domestic violence in those that we serve. So we have domestic violence support groups, that confidence, the social emotional side. So it's something where if we really want to move the needle permanently, and we feel like that's the goal of what we do, of those that we hire, it takes looking at the whole person and understanding that like what has caused them to miss work in the past or struggle with employment, those barriers have to be addressed to get on to the next thing. And so that's why people are with us for about 2 years, because it takes a long time to, get your GED or get your driver's license or, see a therapist and talk to them about your mental health goals. It takes a long time. And we do that all during paid time. I don't think people know this about us, is we're a traditional like 9 to 5, but only 60% of that time is actually done working on production. The rest is paid time dedicated to case management, meeting with your social worker, meeting with career advancement individuals, going to domestic violence support groups, getting your GED, driver's training. So we bring all these things on site so that with other partners that we can have an opportunity for somebody that they can get paid to get their GED while at work. And I think that's been a big part of why we've been successful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's so unique. You don't hear about that happening in any, at least I don't, in work situations.
It's not very common. It's not a common thing. And I think that's why we exist. And there was an incredible study that said, in order for one woman to get out of poverty in Chicago, like a single woman, she had to go to over 70 different organizations.
Wow.
Possible. And that is like, so once you're in that position, it's almost impossible to get out. And it's impossible to do alone, let alone accomplishing all these things, like bridging that gap by yourself. And we make it such a nearly impossible hurdle, like once you're there, to get out. And so that's kind of what we hope to create, is like, we'll bring in the GED provider, we'll bring in somebody that will do driver's training, we'll work with mental health support, and then we'll do the employment side. So you have to look at all those things at once so that they don't have to ping pong across the entire city just to, turn on their utilities or get a new driver's license. It shouldn't have to be that hard.
Yeah. Wow. It's so inspiring. Everything that you guys are doing, and creating community around people too is so important. Veronica, this podcast obviously is all about stories, and I loved hearing your story, and I know you shared a few, but I'd love to hear a story or two from you about people that have either worked for the empowerment plan, or maybe somebody that touched your heart in a special way that got one of your coats.
Oh, okay. So I have
I'm sure a million
I feel like I have a million stories in my head of like all these people that are just like incredible that I've gotten to work with over the years. There was a woman, and I'm just going to keep names out of a lot of it, just whatever they're comfortable with. But, early days, when the first, I'd say 10 people that worked with us had actually used the coat by the time she came and worked with us. And that was, a wild experience that she had firsthand. She had received a coat. She was living in an abandoned house at the time with an abusive partner. And she left the partner finally and was very, very proud of herself, and was able to break out of that cycle. It was incredible. And she got into a shelter, and then we hired her. It was just the wildest wildest thing for me that she had that experience with the product before even working with us. There's, another woman that was like early on I could tell you like hundreds of stories. This is why it's such a great job to have. Like at the end of the day, it's tough, but like having these stories of, one woman who was living in her car with her like 3-year-old son at the time, started working with us. She hadn't had like employment prior to. She had done survival sex work, which had been very, very. She was 19, 18 when we hired her, so that would kind of what she grew up in, and there was a lot that we learned from each other, like just starting out at Empowerment Plan. Like she was one of the first 5 people, and she became like one of the best, fastest seamstresses we've ever had. Just would crush numbers, like just a beast behind the sewing machine, could just get anything done. And she was with us for about 2 years. This was before we were like at the transitional work. We were just like hiring a few people and seeing what could happen. And so she was able to move on and became a quality manager at a title company. So she is now the person that like an individual that went from homelessness to helping people buy houses. It's just, so she's a quality manager, salary. It's just, her story is incredible. Just a few months ago, I went on a road trip.
I wanted to ask you about
a road trip across 9 different cities, sponsored by GM, sponsored by Chevy. Rode a Suburban filled with coats to 9 different cities, and to see a lot of our partners that hand out the coats, that have reached out to us over the years, have never even met us before, most of them, and be able to give back to them after such a difficult year. And so I heard from a lot of people, like I've heard from a lot of people in Detroit that have had the coats, but this gave me an opportunity to like hear directly from somebody in like Boston, what they were going through. And there was a guy who I got to talk to who was the sweetest human being. And he was talking about how he had slept in the coat the week before. This was during the blizzard. And he's like, it saved my life. He was so nice. And he was like, I'm using this for the next couple of weeks, but in a couple of weeks, I'm getting my housing. I'm finally getting an apartment. Like, I'm really excited. And then I'm, are you guys going to come to Boston? Because I'm looking to get a job, because I want to free up space for somebody else. Like somebody else, there's a lot of people out here that need help. And I think for me, that was a reminder like to a lot of people, what I think when people think of somebody that is homeless, when they think of somebody that's displaced, they have an image in their mind of like somebody lazy or somebody mentally not, mentally ill or, struggling with mental health issues. They have all these ideas, these biases in their head of like, this person doesn't want to work, or like this idea of what homelessness looks like. And it is a million different things. And there is no one thing. And also, talking to that guy that had like slept outside in negative temperatures in the middle of a blizzard and was so excited to get his apartment so somebody else could get something because he thought they needed it more than him.
Such a selflessness.
And it's like, and I don't think people think about individuals that are like going through this as like human beings that want to give back as well.
But so many of them are. Like, I feel like I've heard so many stories like that. And even recently, like people who were on assistance for because of COVID, and we haven't seen all the negative effects from COVID, but I'm hoping that there are going to be so many good things that come out of everything that we've experienced over the past year. And one of those is I hope that it helps other people see the people around them and that encourages them to do good. But I was talking to somebody recently and they were sharing how this family that they knew was on assistance. And the second that they got a job, they called and canceled it because they were like, hey, I don't need it anymore. I just got a job, all excited. And there's just such a beautiful selflessness, but also community. Like everybody's looking out after one another and making sure they're okay.
Yep. And like, poverty and homelessness can be incredibly isolating. You get treated as if you're less than human.
Yeah.
And and leaving that community of people that that you've known for a very long time potentially, or your whole life even, is really hard. So it's so important. Like a lot of the work that we do now is trying to and trying to figure this one out, is creating those friendships and those bonds, because it is really lonely going from this one place that maybe that's all you've ever known to something new. It's lonely, it's scary, all of those things. It's not so easy as everybody thinks it is.
What was the experience like going on the road, meeting all these people? Like, I'm sure that it just opened your eyes up to so many different things, but you're welcomed with open arms.
Oh, absolutely. And, a lot of air hugs, but like, it was wild because it with the timing of it too, COVID hasn't gone anywhere. It's still here. The pandemic is still going on. But at the same time, we knew that there was like a very critical need out there. And also just kind of wanted to understand what was going on with the people that we serve. We felt so isolated after a year of like just us kind of working in our bubble. We felt very disconnected from kind of the other aspect of those other individuals that we also serve with our coat. And so it was an incredible reminder, also just devastating when you look at the numbers of people, like most of the shelters or most of the outreach groups that I talked to, experienced similar to like what we were just talking about, of us seeing like a 2-month wait list and thousands more orders than we've ever experienced before. Across the board, like in New York, there was one organization that would serve about 1,600 families a week, and that went up to about 6,000 families a week over a couple months, like not that long of a span of time. It was a food pantry of sorts. And that family size too was what I think we're really seeing, that we may not fully recognize just yet, but we're going to be seeing soon, which is that family size went from like 4 to 6 people per household to it was like 10 to 12 people per household. And in New York, those are small households, like physically small households. And so they're saying, and everyone across the board saying, oh, and we're expecting this to only get bigger. We're going to see another 40% increase over the next year. And so I think the need, while we may not see it because we're all kind of in our houses and kind of removed from it, has definitely been growing. That was what was really profound.
That's a really good reminder too, to everybody that's listening, because I think a lot of people are like, cool, vaccines, now we can go back to our lives. But there are so many people that are going to be suffering more than ever over the next couple of years. And so anything that people can do to support your work, support all these organizations and shelters. And I was telling people during the pandemic, you don't even have to go to the shelter if you're scared. Message them or call them and just say, hey, what do you need? What can I drop off? What can I have Amazon deliver? There are all these like delivery services too.
Exactly.
So getting people to think outside the box.
Well, and like even just food, like
right,
like extra pantry items, like just to families in the area. And again, even thinking small, thinking of your neighborhood, reaching out to people that and asking, like, on Nextdoor, I've seen a lot of people like show up in those apps and be like, hey, I've got extra groceries. Anybody like message me privately? There's a lot of things that even just in your neighborhood, I'm sure are going on. And so, yeah, there's so many ways. And if you can afford to do it, like donating to those organizations, but there's also other ways to do it as well. Yeah, it's a wild time. Absolutely.
Wild time.
Yeah, I don't even know how else. I'm like, it's surreal. Like,
I know. One day we'll hopefully look back on this and just be like, I can't believe like the stories that we'll tell generations and generations after us. They'll be like, you lived through that? But
yeah, that was the year or two or however long, I'm just I feel so grateful. And I think it sounds almost ridiculous, but I feel so grateful and so lucky that I can have the work that I do, that we didn't have to stop what we were doing, like that our people are healthy and are safe. Like if you just really puts in perspective, like all of those things this past year.
Yeah. Veronica, where does the empowerment plan go from here? Are you going to do another road trip? I know that you have a lot of big things that you're working on, but like even thinking like 5 or 10 years down the line, what are your big hopes and dreams for the empowerment plan?
It's funny because we're coming up on 10 years and it's the entirety of my 20s were spent in the empowerment plan. I think for the organization, there's definitely those road trips are going to have to become a part of what we do and what I want even more of my job to be about. And just being able to like bring team members with me. We could only do like a couple because of COVID. We can only have a couple attend a couple of handouts, but moving forward, making that just a part of what we do, because we can't lose sight of that connection of like who and why we're doing this. And, the other individuals that we serve that we may not see every day. I can't wait to go again. I can't wait to see some of these, and I can't wait just to like volunteer at some of these organizations again. And then for the organization as a whole, I think it's just this year is like, keep up with demand, survive, survive this next year. We have very simple goals. We're looking to hire a lot of people because we couldn't hire as many last year because, our team didn't feel as safe. We were, a lot of shelters had a lot of outbreaks of COVID. And so we just wanted to be very cautious. Mm-hmm. And so we're just trying to hire as many people as we can. So we're very lucky to be able to do that. And we'll see over the next few years, we get a lot of requests from other cities to bring the model into their community. So I think it's kind of figuring out what does that look like? What does scaling look like for us? Do we just grow large in Detroit, or do we actually bring the model to other communities?
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see where you go from here. And everybody who's listening, what can they do to support your work? Obviously, they can request a coat, they can pay for a coat for someone else. What are the ways that people can get involved in your incredible work?
There's a lot of ways. So on our website, we give a couple different ways to get involved. So if you want to support the individuals that we hire and their journey, there's ways to get involved there, whether it's like sponsoring a class or a lunch or things like that, or bus passes, or, all sorts of interesting things to get behind with the individuals that we serve. And I think for us there's ways that you can get a coat out to somebody in need, but I think just finding out on the site if there are things that resonate with the individuals and the women that we hire.
That's awesome. And I'll post all your social media links, because I always tell people that's a free way that you can support.
Buy a sweater, a t-shirt, hoodie. We have a lot of good swag.
Awesome. I'll post all of that stuff so people can get involved and rep the movement.
I love that. That sounds really cool. I just said buy swag. You're like, rep the movement. Sounds much really better in advertising speak. I'm just saying.
You have created a movement. So I hope that everybody who's listening gets involved and supports your work. And I'm so grateful to be connected with you and to be following all the great work that you're doing. But before I let you go, Veronica, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I think like I said earlier, we tend to be our harshest critics in this. And then we tend to believe in other people before we believe in ourselves, and want to follow other people before we follow ourselves. And I think if that's like the one thing that I know I struggled with and was the reason I almost didn't do what I'm doing now, was because I didn't think I was the right person to do it. And I think that everybody has the capability and it's always worth trying. If you just believe in yourself and it doesn't work out, what's the worst that's going to happen? I think there's a lot of other positives that could happen versus the negative.
And what if you fly? There's that saying where
what if you fly, and what if you fly?
Yeah.
I own those words, like the entrepreneur, business owner. I see a lot of people that have me included, really struggled with that. And it's no, we get to own that just as much as anybody else.
And it's the little baby steps too, because even you thinking about all the little things that you do. And so if you have a hope or a dream, go for it. But
it doesn't have to be massive, starting small. I didn't start off empowerment plan thinking I was going to like impact even as many, like I was just like, okay, we've got like a few people here in Detroit want to make coats for. And I think there's power in that, like working on it, being like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, getting my feet under me. And you don't have to like start off to change the world. You can just be like, I want to change my community.
And you can do it in the little ways. Your
And
neighbors.
there's a million different little ways to do it.
But Veronica, I am so grateful to be connected with you. Thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.